Yo, what is up everyone? Back here with another video. Today we're going to be going over how to EV and kind of a comprehensive guide of how to do so. Pretty much I just wanted to take you guys through the whole EVing process, give you guys as much information as possible to help you out. And yeah, we'll work from there. So pretty much with EVing, it's something that is very like complex in a way. And I think it's like, it can be tricky, but I think at a beginner level, people get too caught up on it. And if they know some basic tricks, it makes it a lot easier to EV, right? So I'm kind of going to be showing you guys some basic things on how to EV, how to optimize certain things, and how to kind of do stuff so you can kind of work with it easier. So I want to go over it in a different way than I've done it before, which is where I talk to you guys about certain optimizations to stats, certain ways to approach building, stuff like that, right? So first thing I wanted to talk about was speed investment, right? So typically this involves you finding a way, or finding what speed tier you want your Pokemon to be at. You want your Pokemon to be at. So usually in a non-Dynamax format, things are a little bit more straightforward. So pretty much what you're going to see is you just want to EV your Pokemon to outspeed another threat. So for example, right, Raikou is really easy because you'd go max speed because you want to be tied with other Raikou, right? But then when you get to certain Pokemon, like, for example, let's look at a base 168, for example, Salamence, right? Normally, you'd assume that you'd want to be max speed, but realistically, you're not hitting much else besides an opposing Salamence. Garchomp outspeeds you everything, so you can be afforded to, like, kind of invest more into bulk. Now, where would you go? Let's say you want to invest a little more speed. You'd still have to go Jolly and go like 162 if you wanted to outspeed Arcanine, right? And that's just one specific instance of EVing for a certain Pokemon or like idea, right? Not a specific example, but just to kind of give you guys an idea of what it is. So typically, there are a few ways you can invest for speed tiers, right? So first, it can be to directly outspeed something, right? Speed something with no added like conditions, right? You can have it so that you directly outspeed something, outspeed after a tailwind. You outspeed after the opponent is -1, so -1 speed, right? So that would be, for example, Electroweb, Icy Wind, and I actually just realized I just put an equal sign, which is kind of dumb. So let me fix that. Okay. And then you can also EV so that you outspeed once your speed is +1, right? And if you're in a Dynamax format, this would be a max move, and then if not, it would be a Dragon Dance or something that boosts your speed, right? So, and then you could just aim to directly underspeed something in Trick Room, making you go first. But usually Trick Room mons are pretty uncontested in their speed tiers. So this is kind of the things you want to have in mind when you're working on speed tiers specifically, so outspeeding certain things. And like I can give you guys a certain example of this with like a couple of varying mons. So for example, right, let's look at Gyarados. Gyarados is one of those examples of a Dragon Dance mon. So Garchomp hits 169 speed stat, right? And Raikou hits 183 speed stat, and Latios hits 178 speed stat. So let's aim to outspeed Latios, because out of everything, Latios is the thing that Gyarados can most realistically deal with. Your speed tier would have to be at 120. Now, the reason why it'd have to be at 120 is because half of 120 is 60. You add 60 to 120, you're at 180 speed. Now, let's say we look at this. As I mentioned, I haven't mentioned this yet, but Pokemon pretty much rounds down on all of its calculations. So basically, it's going to give you half of 118. So half of 118 in this instance, right, is going to be... God, I hate math. Babe, what's half of 118?
Half of 118?
Yeah, Sierra's here, by the way, guys. Yeah, what's half of 118?
136. Oh, you're talking about like 100, not like decimal?
Yeah, guys.
I was thinking of like one, like slash.
No, like 118. What is half of that?
118. 59.
59. Okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, so, but that gives you 177 speed, so it's not enough to outspeed Latios, right? So you need to be You need to be 120 speed to outspeed Latios after Dragon Dance, right? So that's one example. Obviously, if you are not good at math, like me and Sierra, use a calculator.
I had the right numbers both times.
Yeah, anyways, use a calculator. But pretty much, yeah, that'll give you a good idea of kind of where you guys want to be speed-wise. Now, when it comes to the other Pokemon that you're EVing with, I'll give you guys an example of outspeeding in Tailwind. So, for example, let's say you're using something like Azumarill, and you want it to be faster because you don't have Trick Room on your team, for example, right? Now, pretty much with that, the speed tier you're going to want to hit usually would either be 101 if you want to be really fast, because that's going to outspeed everything, including Crobat, which is the fastest Pokemon in the format. Or if you wanted to go a bit slower, because, I mean, who cares about Crobat, then you would go 90, because at double, which 90 times 2, would be 180, outspeeding Latios. And if you wanted to outspeed Raikou, then it'd have to be 92, because double of 92 is going to be 184. And Raikou hits 183. So that's kind of a general example of how you would do speed EVs, right? Now, let's look at other things. So, for example, hitting the bump, right? So you guys might be wondering, okay, what is a bump, right? What is a bump? So pretty much on every Pokemon, free Pokemon's nature boosted stat. So remember, it has to be boosted by a nature boosted stat. Modest, Adamant. I'll give another example, Jolly, etc. You'll see that as, oh, I spelled Jolly wrong. That's kind of embarrassing. But yeah, so pretty much as you'll see as we go down, right? Let's go pick a random Pokemon. Baby, you got a Pokemon for me? Raikou, okay. So you'll see that Raikou, as we're investing, even though Raikou technically you go max speed anyways, if we give it a timid nature, you'll see that, like, pay attention to this stat, right? Going up by 1, going up by 1, going up by 1, going up by 1. Oh, just went up by 2. Going up by 1, going up by 1. Continues to go up by 1, and then over here it goes up by 2. So pretty much on every stat there is a bump, and usually this is a little bit more relevant for offensive stats, because as I mentioned with speed stats, it's a little bit different, and that's actually kind of what negates like Raikou in this example. So let me give an example with like Scizor, right? So Scizor pretty much, if you invest Adamant into it, right, pretty much you'll see, oh, I don't know why it's IVs are minimum, right? But pretty much you'll see that you can hit the bump, right, here. And if you need like a general bulk investment, typically you want to go and hit one of these bumps, right? Like, because let's just say you're trying to make a general investment, you don't really know where to go. Like, hitting one of the bumps is usually the best thing you can do. And it also depends on how much bulk you want to put into a certain Pokemon, right? That makes a big difference. So that's just kind of part of the whole idea behind it. So yeah. Pretty much, right, now let's go and think a little bit more about, after we hit those bumps, right? So there are 3 bumps on a Pokemon, right? Or technically 4, but we'll just say 3 to make it easier, right? 3 bumps. So I'd say it's the lowest, the middle, and then the highest. Now, to determine which one you want to hit, it depends on your general benchmarks / how bulky you want a Pokemon to be, right? So yeah, literally, like for my Scizor, I usually invest like to the second bump, like the middle bump, and then I go a lot more investment in HP, optimizing the HP, which I'm going to talk to you guys about after this, and then kind of maybe even giving it a little more special defense, so it can kind of take some special hits better, because its defense is already decently high. Right? So that's my preference, but someone else might want to be like, okay, I want to be more offensive, so I'm going to hit the max bump to do as much damage as possible. And that's just kind of the general idea with like those investments. So now I'm going to go into the next thing, which is optimizing HP stats, right? So for optimizing HP stats, right, this one's really interesting. So I think it's actually the most in-depth one out of everything. So there are a couple things that we're going to go over. So first, we're going to go over optimizing leftovers and optimizing sand and hail, right? Sand, hail chip. So, right, let's look at leftovers. Leftovers divides your health by it divides your health by 16, and it gives you a 16th of your health back every single turn, 6%, right? Now, I believe that's it, right? Anyways, something like that. I just know you divide it by 16. Anyways, so point being, right, to find the optimal HP stat for leftovers, for example, let's take a random Pokemon, right? For example, Politoed. Politoed's a really good example for the leftovers example, just because you can kind of optimize the HP for it pretty simply. So let's say we bring Politoed to 192 HP, right? Now for Politoed, the reason why we're getting it to 192 HP is because it is divisible by 16, which means it is going to be getting the most amount of leftovers recovery possible. Now, if you look, 192 divided by 16 is going to give us 12. So you want it to be a number without a decimal because that means it's going to be the highest proportion of recovery, like kind of compared to its health, right? Now for sand, you do the same thing, except that after you get the number, the HP number that is divisible by 16, you subtract an HP stat by 1. So pretty much you're doing this because now, let's say your Pokemon is sitting at 191 HP, right? And you divide that by 16, it's 11.9. And here's the trick. Pokemon always rounds down. So it will never round up in terms of the amount of chip you receive. So because of that, you're getting as much HP as possible without increasing your sand chip. And that's useful because now you're going to be taking as little sand damage proportional to your health in terms of percentages as possible. And that's what you're aiming for pretty much. So like obviously with leftovers, you want to be taking more recovery, but with sand, you want to be taking less, which is why you specifically go to this number. So I'll give you guys a quick little note here. So for leftovers, HP stat number that is divisible by 16, right? And then you want HP stat number that is divisible by 16 minus 1 stat point. So, for example, give you guys an example, right? Let me write this here. Example 192. And then over here, example 191, 192 minus 1 equals, oh my bad, equals 191. Optimized number. Okay, so that's pretty much it for sand and hail chip. Now with berries, right, so we'll go over berries recovery. So berries are a little bit more of an interesting one. So ideally, it kind of depends on what you're aiming for, but for Mago and like the pinch berries, it's a little bit trickier. So we're going to go over citrus first because citrus is really easy. So citrus, you want your HP stat number to be even. So there is a clear 50% proc, right? So for example, right, if you have like let's say you have like 191 even on Toad, right? If you have 191 on Toad, that means the citrus berry is not going to proc at it's not going to proc at, oh my god, I have to do math again. Babe, what's half of 192?
Half of 192?
Yeah.
96.
96. Okay, thanks. Okay, so let's say it's not going to proc at 96 HP basically, because that would require you to be 192. So with 191 as your HP set, it's actually going to proc at 95. Now, that's weird because obviously you could be taking damage, and because the number's uneven, you don't get the proc, right? And that's not great. You usually want the number to be even so you get the exact proc. And you'll see that if we divide this by 2, obviously you're going to get 96, right? So you're going to get what Sierra said, pretty much it's going to be procking at 96. Now, if you take 191, right, and you divide it by 2, you're going to be getting 95.5, and because Pokemon always rounds down, it's going to be procking at 95, which is kind of weird, and it can end up in you awkwardly not getting your citrus berry. Now, the reason why this is also bad is because you do want your HP number to be divisible by 4 for the maximum amount of citrus berry recovery. So, for example, let's take 191 divided by 4. You'll see it's 47.75. Now, the issue with this is that you're only going to be getting 47 HP, even though your decimal is closer to the, higher recovery number. So if you're 192, right, and you divided that by 16, then you'd be getting 12. Now, you might be like, okay, well, this would increase your sand chip, so why would you want to do that? Same principle applies. You can always go 4 back or, like, do a different number if that's something you're concerned about, right? Or, no, my bad, sorry. 188 divided by 4, you'll see 47, right? You just want to make sure it's divisible by 4 so you get the best recovery out of it. Now, there are certain instances where you will want to be optimized for both leftovers and also for Citrus Berry. And those instances are usually going to be pretty much when you have a grassy terrain mon on your team. It's not so relevant in this format, but like in other formats it is. And when you don't want it to be, you know, optimized for sand or whatever, pretty much you take the number, so you get the, you know, like optimize, like taking the most, or like the number that takes the most amount of damage from sand, right? Let's say you're trying to optimize for both Citrus Berry and sand, right? And you subtract 4 from it, and that should give you the number that you need. If you're trying to optimize for both sand and citrus, pretty much. So, yeah, that's pretty much it for the citrus explanation, right? You want set number even, so there's a clear 50% proc. You want the number to be divisible by 4 for max recovery, right? Now, I'll give you guys a guide example if you are trying to pair the Pokemon with grassy terrain, use one of the optimal grassy terrain recovery numbers. Use one of the optimal grassy terrain / leftovers recovery numbers. I only mentioned grassy terrain because it could be relevant in other formats, and I'm trying to make this a kind of a comprehensive guide. And then, right, if we were doing example, if you are trying to have optimal citrus recovery and optimal sand recovery, or sand chip resistance, sand / hail chip resistance, you want the optimized, or what's it called, the number that like kind of takes the most. So number divisible by 16 minus 4 stat points. So an example of this would be 176 minus 4 equals 172. So hopefully that kind of explains it for you guys, so you guys can get a general idea of how it works. I know it's a lot of math. As you kind of, you know, work through it more, you get a little more used to it. But this is kind of just a general guide, just to kind of give you guys ideas. And we're gonna obviously all implement this on one Pokemon, or like maybe a couple Pokemon, right? So we can kind of give you guys a actual example of this. Now, there are a couple other nuanced things that like are less so important but can matter, right? So first thing I want to talk about is even versus odd stat numbers. Typically doesn't make a difference. Typically doesn't make a difference besides boosting moves, right? So for example, right, let's say that we're boosting our Tyranitar to +1, right? You'll notice that the Tyranitar spread that a lot of people use usually hits an even number. Now, the reason why it hits an even number, so let's do adamant, right? Let's get it to 198, right? Or even like 187, and then we bump it up one more because we hit the bump C and then we bump it up one more. The main reason why you'd bump it up one more is because let's say we do 187, right? Times 1.5, which is a boost, right? See, we get 280.5, right? So we're getting 280 attack because Pokemon always rounds down, as I mentioned. And that's fine, right? But now look what happens when we put 188, right? 188 times 1.5. We get 282. So we just got 2 extra stat points just because we added 1 extra stat point to our Pokemon, making sure it was even after it got the boost. So you guys will see kind of where that importance lies. With speed, it's a little bit different because there are certain things you just want outspeed, and that's like your raw benchmark. But with actual stat boosting moves, like this is a little more relevant, right? Even for something like Scissor, it's relevant because Scissor is prone to getting intimidated after a Swords Dance, so it'd be a +1. So it's kind of a general like idea, if that makes sense. But that's pretty much how you want to approach it. So having an even number is better if you have boosting moves. Boosting moves also counts for Dynamax formats with Max Steel Spike / Quake. But yeah, but even without Dynamax, like this is pretty relevant in BDSP, which in Battle Tower, which is the main focus of this video anyways. I just want to give a little bit of note to Dynamax. So now let's actually take a Pokemon through it, right? Let's actually like work through it and give an example of it. So, okay, first we'll start with Give me a Pokemon.
Gastrodon.
Alright, other than Gastrodon. That one's a little complicated.
Smeargle.
That's 252.
Uh.
Here's bad at examples, guys. Okay, first off, oh yeah, I should also probably note that's actually a good point anyways to bring up. So Sierra brought up Smeargle. Some Pokemon you just want to be straight 252. Usually if a mon's Focus Sash, like Smeargle, you're just going to make it like 252 max speed, 252 HP. Like, it's not too complicated, right? You don't need to like overdo those spreads. There's no specific benchmarks you really want to hit with that. I mean, I guess you could optimize for sand with these, but like Smeargle dies to one hit anyways, so having more HP to pair with your Moody boost is probably good, you know? But yeah, anyways, do you have another example? Zapdos. Okay, perfect. So if we look at Zapdos, right, it obviously will always depend on your moveset what EV spread you go for, but we'll kind of implement all these different things we talked about, right? So first thing, we kind of got to decide how fast we want our Zapdos to be. So let's make our Zapdos specs. Let's say it's very offensive, right? It's running Thunderbolt, it's running Discharge, it's running Volt Switch, and it's running Hyper Beam, right? So we want it to be very specially offensive. We want it to be max speed, so it can be outspeeding pretty much everything, even the other Pokemon it ties with, right? So it can get fast Volt Switches off and outspeed things, right? So with our max speed, we're pretty much aiming to outspeed basically anything a bit slower than it. Now, next thing we're going to do here, right, is we're going to optimize our HP for the optimized sand chip, right? So we're taking less sand in Hail Chip, 175. If you divide it by 16, we'll give you 0.9, like I think it's 10.9, I believe, of the HP. Anyways, point being that you're going to be taking less sand than usual, right? So we can even put that number in the calculator, right? 175 divided by 16, 10.9, right? And that means we're only going to be taking 10 sand chip, but we're getting as much HP as possible without it. And then the rest we put in special attack. Now, you'll notice that the special attack is even, which is good because that also allows us to get a stronger specs boost. Specs boost, it multiplies by 1.5, right? So if we had something like 167, right, and we multiplied that by 1.5, that wouldn't really be great because then we're losing out on 2 stat points. But because we're 168, right, we multiply that by 1.5, we're getting a pretty much 2 extra stat points out of it, right? So it's just a really nice option to have. And we're not really worried about investing in bulk because we want our Zapdos to be offensive. So now let's do another example, right? Let me put a BST up here, right? So let's say we're looking at something like, I'm trying to look for a good Pokemon that would kind of work well here. Okay, let's say Latios. And this actually brings me into something that we haven't gotten to talk about actually, which is Life Orb Optimizations. It's actually something I forgot. So we're going to go back real quick. Life Orb Optimization. You want your HP stat to end in 9. So example is 159. Now, I bring up this specific number, right? Because pretty much if you look at Life Orb divides by 10, right? So basically if you're 9 or like the closer you are to 9, the less Life Orb damage you're going to be taking proportional to your HP without increasing the tick. If your number ends in 0, you're taking the most Life Orb damage possible because Life Orb does 10%. And if anything ends in 0, obviously it can be divisible by 10. So that's like kind of the problematic aspect of it there. Now, let's take Latios, right? We're going to make it timid. We want it to be max speed like most other Pokemon. Now, Latios, we're going to be optimizing the HP to 159. Now, 159 is a good number for multiple reasons. 159 is going to make sure we're taking less Life Orb damage, but it's also going to be optimizing our sand and our hill damage, so we're taking less of that on Latios as well. So it works out really nicely. Then, pretty much from there, you're just going to go 4-4 and then 220, right? And I'm just putting 4-4 so we get an extra EV out of it. You don't always do this. Obviously, for example, like Zapdos, you're not going to do that because then you're, kind of ruining your specs boost, right? But in examples of Pokemon where you can do that, right, there's no harm in it because you get like an extra. So you see like here, we only get 1 stat point out of that 8, right? But if we take that 8 out and we put it 4-4, we're getting like 2 extra stat points out of it. So it's just like a small optimization thing where you can get a little bit of extra points out of it. But yeah. Now, the next thing that I wanted to go over, let's look at a kind of like Pokemon. Let's look at a Pokemon like Arcanine, right? A more supportive Pokemon like Arcanine. Pretty much, let's say that we want it to be a bit of a, it's going to be support, right? It's going to be Will-O-Wisp, stuff like that. It's going to have a Mago Berry, right? So with the Mago Berry, it's kind of the same thing. You want there to be, you want it to be divisible by 4 as well. The only weird thing is that it restores 33% of your HP. So if your number is divisible by 3, that would be nice. Like if your number can be divided by 3, but it's not like necessary, right? So for example, 192, if you divide that by 3, you actually get a good number for it, right? Like it's actually going to give you really good recovery out of the Arcanine's Mago Berry. So pretty much here, if you hit 192, not only is it divisible by 4, so procs at 25% of your HP, but it also gives you the most recovery possible relative to your HP. Then Jolly Nature, let's say you go 154, that lets you outspeed like Timid Specs Rotom. And then you pretty much just put in a bit of general bulk. I usually like to put a lot more defense into Arcanines because there are a lot of like, you know, physical attackers that you don't really want to deal with. So typically I like to just put 4 here and then the rest into defense, right? And having a little bit of special defense so it can take some hits better. Now, pretty much the you'll see the general idea here is just finding those certain optimizations you want, whether it's optimizing for Berry, optimizing for Life Orb taking less damage, optimizing for Sand or Hail, or just being straight offensive or like fast in Smeargle's case, right? Now we'll do a slower Pokemon just to kind of balance it all out so you guys can kind of see the implementation of it, because we have had a lot of quick Pokemon here that haven't required any different speed tiers. So let's take a Pokemon that's kind of in the middle, something like Scizor, right? So with Scizor, right, I mentioned that you're going to want to make it adamant. Now, you want to make sure to have an even number so that after you get a Swords Dance boost, right, even if you get intimidated or something, you're still going to have a beneficial boost to your Scizor, right? Now, you can hit the third bump, but typically hitting the second bump is nice because what you're going to do is you're going to allot yourself extra points for bulk. We're going to optimize Sand and Hail Chip, specifically Hail Chip here because that's the one that matters. Sand doesn't affect Scizor because Steel type. So we're going to be optimizing the Hail Chip here. Now, with the remaining HP we have, we can either choose to invest in the speed, which in this case isn't too relevant. I just want to put 12 speed in because it's going to let me outspeed opposing Scizor and be a little bit faster than them. And then the rest into special defense so it can take hits well. And you'll see the 12 speed here was literally just being mindful of other Scizor and potentially like, you know, like other slower Pokemon that are trying to be a little bit faster. But yeah, that's like the general idea behind it and kind of how it's used. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. This is kind of the general idea of like how you want EV, how you want to utilize this stuff, how to make the small optimizations. I'll try and leave this in a paste bin in the description so you guys can have access to this. If you guys are interested in learning more about this, I do private coaching where I actually like kind of work through you guys with this, so you guys kind of get the ability to really practice and do this stuff. But yeah, make sure to let me know if you guys enjoy this kind of video, if this helped you out. Make sure to let me know any specific questions in the comments as well, and I can help you guys out with that. And I'll make sure to talk to you guys about it when I can. But once again, guys, thank you for all the support on the videos, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace.